Hello, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a show that is a conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. My name is Megan Rounds, and I am so happy to see you here today. Today's guest is a naturally born empath, intuitive author, and creatrix located in the Phoenix, Arizona area. She has a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University in communication and writing and has authored 2 books. Shift Happens, 21 Days to Better Energy Through the Chakras, which I happen to have a copy of right here. And Release Density and Shift Your Life, which was just released earlier this month, if I'm not mistaken. Both books are available at Amazon, and links will be included in the show notes so you can check them out. You can mainly find her here in the main lab as a moderator and designated practitioner, where she hosts the weekly show Soulful Self-Care with Arielle Sterling on Thursday afternoons. She's also a facilitator, as am I, for the Psychic Development Circle, hosted by Crystal Ann Compton and Lauren Antuafermo. It's a great program for honing your psychic abilities. It really is. And it gets deeper with time. I highly encourage you to check it out if you have an interest. I'm going to include a link to that program in the show notes as well. So please give a bright light workers welcome to Arielle Sterling. Yay! And I'm going to bring her on right now. Hi!
Hi! Oh my gosh, you are so good, and I'm so sorry. I'm so scattered this week. You did such an amazing job with me not giving you any information. So you guys, Megan, she's the ish, you guys. She's got it all under control.
Thank you. Did you like the card I read?
That was amazing and perfect. I was like, oh, dang, calling me out on everything right now.
I looked at, totally. I shuffle a couple of different ways, and I cut the deck, and I do all of these things, and I'm like, what will be the most relevant thing for people who see the show today? And that came up, and I just started laughing, because I'm like, well, oh, okay.
I know. That's hysterical. I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot even believe calling me out, spirit, always. But that's kind of the beautiful thing about cards and decks. You can't really hide from spirit, right? There's no spirit's going to call you on your stuff every single time.
Definitely, yes.
Yep.
We can talk more about this in a minute, because there's a deck that I want to bring up, but I want to talk with you about some other things first. One being, I don't know if you want to share here or not, and if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, maybe say what's going on this week for you, because it kind of popped up out of almost nowhere.
I don't know that I'm officially allowed to openly disclose yet, but okay. I have a lot of movement and transition going on in my life. You know, when they talk about how everything kind of happens all at once, it's kind of one of those situations where everything's happening all at once. And so in a couple days, maybe as I get a little more kind of in step and in tune, I'll be more open to share. But it's, sure. Guys, I promise, it's a waterfall. It's not just one thing, right? It's one thing, and it triggered a whole other set of things. But that's the way it always is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Change happens, shift happens, right? I mean, you just said it. Shift happens. So, you kind of can't fight it when it does. You just kind of have to take a nice deep breath and roll with it.
That's right. Yes.
Right?
I keep thinking there's a visual of when a door opens, but for you, it's like the side of a building when they lift up the garage door at a restaurant or something for an open air experience. It's kind of like that. Okay, well.
1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, no, it's so interesting. And it's, like I said, everything happens at once. And I think that's kind of something you guys may notice as light workers as well. Nothing is small, right? We don't do anything small anymore. That's not part of our DNA anymore. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it big. We're going to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck.
Yep.
Right.
And sometimes it's well before you feel prepared for it. At least that's how it is for me. Sometimes it's okay, I may have asked for this, and in fact I did, and here it is, and it's whoa, I was thinking it'd be in increments, but no, it's not.
No, and so that's kind of the thing. When you put something to the universe is yeah, you sure, you ready? Bam!
Yep.
So, keep in mind those conversations, you guys, that you're having in your head, those things that you're talking about with the universe, right? If you're lingering on those thoughts for longer than 17 seconds, you're actually manifesting that shit. So be careful what you're thinking about, right?
Yep.
Careful what's going on.
Yeah.
In my experience, it's normally good things, right? Because I like to focus on the good things. But yeah, guys, those conversations that are going through your mind, those are everything. That's manifestation city.
It is. I like to say what we focus on expands. I mean, there's a couple of different ways I like to say it, but because of that, so we're manifesting it. There it is. And then sometimes we don't even realize that we're manifesting more of what we're thinking about, because we're already thinking about it, and it's like hard to notice sometimes. And it's like, why is everything like this?
Because you asked for it? Yeah. What? This is exactly what you asked for?
Without knowing it. Yep. I mean, sometimes. And sometimes we do ask for it, and there it is. And, and sometimes we ask for it, and it takes a little longer. It all just depends.
And I can, put my big girl pants on too for a second and admit there's some resistance too sometimes, right? Sometimes you're faced with a situation that's brand new. And even though you want it, even though it's bright and shiny, and it's going to be fantastic, part of this human body for a second says, oh, hold up.
Yeah.
What's going on? What are you doing? So there is that bit of adjustment, right? Because we are spiritual beings, yet we inhabit this human body. So there's almost that time delay.
Definitely. I have an example of this from this week. Earlier, on Thursday, so just 2 days ago, I had another mashup with Amber Poole. I can't believe I spaced her name. I don't space her. It's like her. We had a wonderful conversation, and one of the things we talked about were these, like, doing missing persons cases and how we're attracted to them, but we're also kind of uncomfortable in a weird way, but not a bad way necessarily. And so we were talking about that, and then right after that, I noticed in the Psychic Development Circle that that's what we will be talking about on Sunday. And then I was going to say that's this week's PDC topic. Wednesday. Yep. So Wednesday, I'm leading that, and so I'm like, I guess I'm in it. I guess I'm doing it. And I was talking to somebody else about it, and she's like, I kind of get an itching that this is a gift of yours, and I'm like, okay, it's time to be open to it. I've been skimming the sidelines for long enough. It's time to just dive in. And
I think too, the things that we fear the most, right? The things that we have the most resistance to. There's such a gift in that. There's such a blessing hidden in there in our resistance, right?
Yes, there is.
I'm excited for you, Megan. Jeez.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I am, and curious. It's like this is a place of uncertainty for me, and I like this space because anything can happen. And of course, I choose the best case scenario. That's the way I roll, and so it's going to be really awesome. And I can't exactly visualize that yet, but I know it's there, and I can feel things like that. So it's like, okay, good. Let's see what happens. It'll be fun.
That's awesome. And that's the thing, especially when you don't know, just kind of remember at the back of your mind, keep the highest and best intention, right? Because we are exactly where we're supposed to be in every moment, even if it's stressful, even if it's making us crazy, even if we want to pull our hair out like I have been the last week or two-ish. But
it's a good thing you have a lot of hair.
Like, I was going to say, it looks good today, right?
It looks great.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to comment on one of your articles that you had pulled, actually, the first one that you pulled. I am a huge proponent of not wasting food. So I think that's so interesting that beer companies are looking at different ways to kind of use, this is a cereal company, utilizing it as beer, but utilizing the offshoots, whatever, is not capable of using versus just throwing it out, right? How can we, reduce our waste? How can we reduce our footprint? I've seen different breweries, I think in the United States, that were making actual flour from the barley and the oats that they were using in the beer.
Really?
Like, it was taking an extremely long process, right? And it probably wasn't like super cost efficient, but at the end of the day,
Yep.
they were giving back in a different way. So
Yep. I love
I think
things like
that's
that.
super interesting. Yeah.
I was in Decorah, Iowa earlier this year, and I was walking around trying to find a gift for my daughter. Anytime I travel, I try to do that. And they had this really neat container made out of recycled plastic bottles. I wish I had it down here, but it's in her room. But it folds in almost like an egg or like an apple kind of shape. It has like the base of an apple, and then you can open each flap open, and then it folds naturally, and it's its own container, so it doesn't take anything other than this recycled plastic. It's super cool. And I like you like it when things are repurposed and salvaged and reused in a different way. I think that inspires creativity.
Definitely. I'm always one of those people who's looking at things a second way. How can we use it differently? How can we take a second chance at it? I hate throwing things away. I hate, having to throw food away. So I'm constantly like looking at the leftovers. Okay, how can I turn this into something new? What can we do different? Making food just out of the pantry just so I don't, waste food and that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely a huge proponent of not wasting food.
Well, good. I'm glad that resonated. It seems more and more I'm pulling stories that in some way connect to the guest without my knowing it. And I love when that happens. So
there you go.
Super cool. Well, let's talk spiritual journey for a while. You and I prepped earlier this week, and I had mentioned that that's the first question I always, well, except for today, always ask around what's your spiritual journey? How did you end up at the lab? I mean, you can combine them both.
So I guess we'll get to this as a two-part question, right? My spiritual journey, I've always been very keenly aware of things around us. I remember as a child being very strongly clairvoyant, seeing energy, seeing full-on shapes, people. Wow. So I was a little intimidated by it because it wasn't, something that was super normal, right? Not everybody, walks around talking to dead people and seeing people's energy and seeing where they're in pain and being like, oh, why is your shoulder hurting? As a 5-year-old, and people are like, what? Why are you? Get the fuck out of my space. You know what I mean? Like people don't like appreciate that as a child. They're like, huh, that's a little weird. So it became overwhelming, and I asked for it to be turned off. And so probably, mid-elementary school, I stopped seeing energy. I stopped, experiencing those things because I got scared. And so once I got into high school, once I started to realize that these were truly gifts, that the things that I could do were really a blessing and it wasn't a curse, right? These weren't terrible, horrible things that were happening to me. This was a God-given gift. And, it actually explained a lot of the things that I was going through physically. You guys see that I wear glasses. I didn't always, have glasses. I got glasses when I was in 5th grade. And I remember my mom made me go to vision therapy before I was allowed to get glasses because she thought that it was something that could be, trained out of me or something, right? What I've come to understand over the years of my spiritual journey was that my eyes aren't even so that I can see through dimensions. Because my eyes don't sit evenly on my face. Yeah. And so I kind of cock my head a little bit to even it out. And my glasses help me because I don't, see everything clearly. But it's so I can actually do my job on the spiritual level.
Wow.
So my physical imperfections help me be a better psychic. They help me to be a better intuitive. The same thing with my hearing. When I was very, very young, I had tubes in my ears twice. I was almost deaf. And the guidance that I've received through the years is that it's to help me tune out certain aspects of this realm, to help me tune in upstairs better.
How cool is that? What I especially appreciate is your realization of those things. I just always said I was a Picasso, but not really realizing that maybe those are some energetic elements or psychic elements that I was unaware of. I'm highly clairaudient, and I have clairvoyance as well. I don't see different dimensions the way that it sounds like you do. It sounds like you have, what an awesome gift. But everything sits crooked on my head. And it's like, and I was always ashamed of that. I mean, not now, but, until I embraced the Picasso aspects of things. Because because we're taught that we're supposed to be well, aligned in that way. We're supposed to have, perfect. I mean, wearing glasses is funny to me. People give me the glasses and they're like this usually to start with, and it's like, yeah, you're going to have to do some work on that. So I love that you were aware of that. And I'm curious, when you had asked to shut down your gifts, you said you were around 5 years old. Were there things that happened specifically, like saying to people, things that you noticed about their physical, ailments that encouraged you personally? I mean, where you were like,
I'm trying to think. I think there was a couple incidents with my mom that she was like not happy with what I was doing. And she grew up in a lot of fear, right? Very kind of fear-based household. And so when I was very young, I remember, being able to see full grids on people's bodies. And so I would see colors in different colored energies around them, as to where the pain was, right? So I could see the pain. And then if I asked, I could see where on their body I needed to press or, wave my hand or whatever to release that pain. And so I started doing that with my mom. Like if she would have a headache, right? I would say, okay, let me, pull that out. So the problem was at the time, I also didn't understand boundaries. So I would pull it, but I would then get the headache.
Oh,
right. So I would pull it out of her. And because I didn't understand how to release it because it wasn't mine, I would just pull it into me. And so I would get sick. I would get a headache. But then there were times too, like if she would work a really long day and I wanted her to stay up and play with me, I would, press a spot on her hand and make her wake up. And then she couldn't sleep the whole night. And then she'd get really angry at me. Do you know what I mean? Because she was a really light sleeper. So I think there was probably a couple situations where it was like, no, that's not okay what you're doing. And so I think that was like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. But like I said, she was raised in kind of an arena with surrounding a lot of fear surrounding some spiritual stuff.
Sure.
Because of her grandmother, my great-grandmother, used to hold seances. And so that would scare my grandmother and stuff. So there is always kind of a lot of fear around the kind of work that we do.
Yeah, I could see that. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So in high school, you're like, never mind. I want these back. They work for me. I can see their value and their, how I can be of benefit to the world, or, is that kind of, you just made a declaration, or how did that work?
And honestly, it wasn't even that. It was more, kind of opening back up with my mom. She had always, she had been a professional astrologer. So these things weren't necessarily out of our realm, right? But because it was a little more based in the psychic realm, things we can't see, things we can't necessarily always relate back to, right? Planets, we always know where they are. Stars, we always know where they are. Intuition, we don't know where that comes from, right?
Right.
So it's, even if we believe in astrology, we're not always quite there yet. We haven't jumped the bridge. So in conversations, we had started discussing different things, and she said, maybe it's time for you to get some training, figure out what it was that you were able to do, what, you were seeing, open back up, that kind of thing. So she actually enrolled me in a Reiki class, and she went with me.
Wow.
And I remember very clearly not wanting anybody to touch me because I was very energetically sensitive, right? But I remember in that class being able to help people with their hand positions and what they were doing. And the teachers were just like watching me and like trying to figure out what I was doing. But, I was able to help people. And so afterwards, the end of the class comes and the teachers pull me aside and they're like, we noticed you didn't get any Reiki. Nobody did any work on you. Do you want us to do some work on you? And I said, okay, sure. I mean, you're the instructors. You're fine. You know how to maintain your energy, not, like a bunch of newbies. Because at the time I was not comfortable. I was not letting anybody touch me. Keep in mind, I was like 15. I was an ornery teenager. And they get me on the table, and I remember very quickly going out. I've always been like No, you're not getting anywhere near me. No, thank you. No, but I remember getting on the table, and I remember closing my eyes and going very quickly, and I was brought out into outer space, and I remember seeing the earth, and I could see all of this energy coming from different points of the universe and different, spaces and dimensions and all this stuff, everything coming in. So it was like I was being shown from that outside perspective. I don't know how long I was out for, but I come back and they're in the room like crying, and I'm like, what happened? Like, why is everybody crying? What's going on? Like, this is not normal. Like, do you expect me to keep doing this? You all are crying. Like, what's going on? And they're like crying, and I can barely make out what they're saying, and they're saying that they just saw an angel in the room, and this big angel came in the corner, and nobody can really make out what they're saying. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that's when I realized it was probably a gift. It was probably something that I needed to pay attention to, and I should stop ignoring it, because it seemed to be kind of important to some people who seemed like they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Different experience than the people in the room did, but wow, all around win-win, I guess, for that.
Yeah. It was interesting. We kind of just let it sit. I would go for Reiki sessions, to kind of learn to clear my energy. I started having more instances that I would later connect to not maintaining my own energy, right? Because like I said, I was able to tell when somebody else's energy wasn't fantastic and I didn't want them around, but I wasn't maintaining my own energy, right? So there's a lot of instances growing up where I could tell I was having imbalances. Again, in hindsight, like they say, hindsight is 20/20, that they were energetically related and not necessarily physical or emotional as maybe we previously thought. So I talk a lot about that in the book, actually. In my book, I go through each chakra, and each chakra I talk about a certain instance that I realized I had an imbalance.
Oh. So what, you were still like 15 when you're starting to notice that those imbalances, or that you're not necessarily maintaining your own energy?
What was that? Sorry, you cut out for a second there, Megan.
You were about 15 when you started to notice that you weren't maintaining your own energy and those imbalances?
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely. And, it manifested in a couple different things. I became very depressed. I started receiving psychiatric treatment because of my depression. And so I was being treated for conditions that were really not maybe necessarily physical conditions, if that makes sense, right? They were probably more energetically based in hindsight, because I can look back and I can see these situations that I was placed in and how I physically reacted, right?
Yep.
And how maybe if I had known better, known differently, had responded differently.
Well, and I'm thinking at 15 in general, there's so many emotional things taking place anyway. Physical and not the energetic, that must have been frustrating for you. We have a bit of a delay.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge. There's a little bit of a delay. It was a bit of a challenge, only slightly. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, my brain wasn't fully developed. And I think we are, and I say this as somebody who was medicated before the age of 18. I think that we don't necessarily consider the development stages of where we are at and how we can actually compute things in our own brains. Children, for example, can't be diagnosed with diseases like schizophrenia until the age of 8 because they haven't reached that developmental point, right? There are certain stages in our brain's development we have to get to. So, I mean, that's just one example, obviously, but it's really, really interesting to look at, hindsight, as I can see now, where, yes, I was depressed. Was it something physically within my body, or was it the atmosphere I was in? Was it, my surroundings? Was it how, I was reacting to the people I was with?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So
totally
these are very different conversations that we can have, 10, 15 years later that may not, have the same response.
Yeah, and I'm thinking from my childhood, it wasn't that bad. I mean, there were a lot of really good things, but it was high in conflict and high in frenetic energy, let's say. And it's only now that I've started to really think about how those things affected me, and how I ended up. I mean, I think that whether or not I was born as an empath or with empathic abilities, I don't know, but I know I developed them during that time. And I'm, I can be like the most effective chameleon in the world as a result, which is a gift, but also until you know that it does that, it can also be a
Right.
burden, and a hindrance to development. And so, yeah, all of those conditions and things like that. And, now I think maybe there's more awareness about those conditions, but without using the language of energy, and which is too bad, because I think it should enter the language of these discussions. It's a big part of how we're affected in any environment. So
absolutely, yeah.
I'm trying to be conscious of our little delay, and so it's like I want to. So once you figured these things, so you went through this time as a teenager, a young teenager, where your gifts are resurfacing because in part you're recognizing the benefit of that. How did that shift your life at all? Did things change after that for you, or what happened after that?
Yes, actually my life shifted in a very large way. I had a very fast awakening where I realized that the environment that I was in was not conducive to my health. So I actually left my mother's house when I was 17. And I went to go live with my dad in Arizona because the situation was just less tense. It was less tumultuous. And as I understand now, stress is very bad for the body, and it takes a really big toll on the body. So I was really suffering because of my situation. And so this awareness kind of gave me the heave-ho. So I actually moved for my senior year of high school to Arizona. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I can't help
but
but make
big shift.
Yeah, there's something about Twilight in there for me. Even though she moved earlier, she left Arizona, but it's like, oh wow, and she didn't leave for bad reasons. But yeah, I don't know. I had to say it.
I never made that connection until now. I do like sparkly things. I wish my skin could be that sparkly.
I know.
That'd be amazing.
That would be really cool.
Without makeup, oh my god, seriously. I would be a vampire for that. I mean,
yeah, sure.
What's eternal life anyway? That's fine.
Think of all you could learn, and all the places you could go.
Think
and
of all
see.
you could see,
yes.
Right?
Gosh. Totally. So, wow, moving your senior year. And so did you use or utilize the gift set that you were becoming more familiar with or reconnecting with to adjust to that big change?
Not really, not as well as I could have, right? My dad has always been supportive, but in a different way. Less structure. So he just kind of let me do as I needed to do. And so I kind of checked out for a little while. I came from a very high stress situation, and so I needed to kind of do a lot of nothing.
Yeah.
And so I spent kind of a year doing a lot of nothing, putting on about 40 pounds, stress eating, just kind of figuring out what everything was in my life. But yeah, I didn't really use the gifts as well as I could have. And that's, I think it's so interesting because as light workers, we, as soon as we find our gifts, we expect ourselves to be like in this perfect situation with this perfect life.
It doesn't work that way for me.
I mean,
it has.
There would be no movie without drama, right? We need some entertainment factor here in order, spice of life, some zest here, folks. So, now I can look back and say, okay, I'm a better person for it. At the time, it was pretty stressful, but, I got through it, certainly. I lived to tell the tale.
Definitely. Well, and then you went on to school in Arizona, right? So you must like it. You're still there.
Yeah, I mean,
Not
my
in
family's
school, but in
here.
Arizona.
Right. I just don't like cold weather, to be honest with you. My body doesn't handle cold weather anymore. So that's one of the reasons we stay. It's nice year round. Semi-tropical. I have palm trees right out my door. No, Arizona's really nice. It's interesting. Every time I go home to Chicago feels very dense and heavy on my chest. Like as soon as I land, it's almost like I can't breathe. Like I'm struggling there. And every time I come home to Arizona, it's much lighter. And so that's kind of my sign too, right? I have to listen to how my body reacts and responds because I don't want to live like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's making me wonder about, to me, all cities have a feel about them. I think any place has a feel about it. I mean, there's culture in our homes, there's culture in our environment, but not just the culture, the energetic aspects of that. And I've only been to Chicago once, so I don't really have that kind of connection, but there are certain cities that I've been to that I've liked more than others. And, for me, well, I'm trying to think of what one would, I was born in Seattle, but wasn't raised there. And I lived there in my 20s and I would go back there in a heartbeat, but it's almost like, no, we don't want you back here. I mean, I know that's not what it is, but I go there and I don't ever want to leave every time.
Yeah.
And yet, I lived in Tucson for just a few years, but that's a place that I would go to visit, but I wouldn't want to live again. And that's because for me, I'm an ocean girl in the desert. I got the biggest hives. I didn't even know they were hives. They were dinner plate size hives all over,
my God,
on my legs. And then I got these hives in my fingers and things, and nobody knew what it was. And I didn't really have decent insurance at the time. So I went to my boss paid for me to go, and they're like, I don't know, they're hives. And I'm like, well, that's new information. But we never figured out what it was, and eventually I adapted to the environment, and they stopped coming. But a place that gives me hives should have been a pretty clear idea, or sign.
Right, the body tells us more than we listen to, right?
I was not listening then. I wasn't listening to myself at all. I have a practically a life history of not listening to my body. It's only now that I'm starting to discover the messages that the body has within it. And it's great to feel and understand that differently, but it's still very new for me. I think I shut myself off from that at an early age and just kind of used it as my mode of transportation and a few other things. It's like, wow, I put a lot of miles on this body, walking everywhere. I didn't have a car until my 30s. I walked and rode a bike and did all of these physical things. But, at some point it was kind of like, enough already. Maybe you could do some other things now. But okay. So then, how did things work when you were in it? When did things start to, I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this question. So you're talking about, you went to Arizona, you kind of were there for a while, you didn't really do a whole lot, especially metaphysically speaking. When did those things start to come up in a different way for you, to where it encompassed more of your awareness and or lifestyle?
My friends were always kind of aware of what I did, right? So they'd be sitting on the couch and I'd put my hands on them and they'd say, oh, that's so relaxing. What are you doing? I go, don't worry about it. Just close your eyes. Just don't worry about it. Right? Just kind of under the table, not really talking about what I was able to do. Just, are you enjoying it? Good. Then close your eyes and relax. So my friends always knew about it. And so I would have people who would come to me and say, hey, can we book a session, right? And that's really just how it started. It was just kind of friends and family who, knew what I did and knew that I had a massage table and were kind of excited in that respect. I had friends who were doing this kind of work, and I was always just kind of like, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it, right? I can do what they're doing 20 times better and faster, and so my level is a little different, right? So because when I watch people work, a lot of times I'll ask them, about their process, what they're doing, and different things. So I realized that I had friends that were doing it, and so I thought, okay, maybe I should give it a try. And, like 5 years later, here we are. There was a point that I was, working corporate jobs. I worked full-time for Wells Fargo while I was getting my degree. I worked in insurance after that. And it kind of came to a point where I was doing my intuitive work on the weekends and, going to work during the week. And the more work I was putting in on the spiritual side, my gifts were increasing. But I was also learning that I can't just shut off those gifts Monday through Friday, because that would negate the work that I was doing Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
And so I kind of made the commitment that I had to go all in if this was where I was going. And so I wasn't shutting anything off. I wasn't asking for things, to stop anymore, because I saw how that went before and that wasn't helpful.
Right.
So it got to a point where when I was a claims adjuster, I was actually, I would take recorded statements after somebody would be in a car accident, and I would actually start to see the car accident, and I would start to see what happened. Wow. And so that got to a really uncomfortable point in my business career, right? Because in the insurance world, I can't say, I psychically saw this, this, and this, so I was able to, ask these questions. Granted, my recorded statements were bomb, right? They were fantastic, and people were like, how did you know that? Don't ask me questions, right? Just let me do my job. But at the same time, I don't need to see car accidents, right? I don't need those visuals. That wasn't something that was appealing to me. So I kind of said to Spirit, what are we going to do about this? And so Spirit was like, well, you're about to quit your job. So I kept saying, well, Spirit, you got to tell me, lead me to this, because I don't know when to do it. I don't know what to do. And so I was driving to work one day, and I started getting shooting pain up my arm, to the point where I'm like crying in the car, screaming, like yelling at Spirit, is this what you want from me? I can't work like this, just like ranting, raving. So I go to my desk, get to my computer, my hand isn't moving. I'm literally having to pick up the hand like this and move it around. And my boss's cubicle is right next to me, and she can hear me whimpering. She's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm having a day, I don't know. And she goes to a meeting, she comes back, she's like, are you still having problems? I'm like, yes. And I explained to her what's going on with my hand. And she's like, can you have one of your people fix you? Because she knew it was spiritual, right? I'm like, not till later, blah, blah, blah. And then she comes back a little while later, and I was like, okay, we need to talk. And so we get up to talk. We're walking to the elevator, and my badge falls off my hip. And so at that point, I knew. I was like, oh, okay, we're done. And so I gave my 2 weeks, and that was that.
Wow. And how awesome for you to hear that. I mean, to recognize that. And I know me, for one, it's almost like I have to be hit over the head to get some messages. I stay too long sometimes, in relationships or at work situations, because I want to be sure. And you trusted, and I love that. I have to say, I think it would be so cool. And I mean, if you could say, I psychically saw this, and that could be a part of your job. I mean, and at any job, why shouldn't we be able to include those gifts? I mean, come on. Think of how different the world would be.
Yeah, think about the level of accountability we would have if people could realize, right, as empaths, like, I feel your undertone. I feel like you're not being honest with me, sir, Mr. Salesman, right? But you can't come out and say that, right? You can just say, yo, that guy gives me bad vibes, right? I'm not getting good energy from him.
Yep, and you can ask questions, but they can deny it, and then, there's that whole,
But that's the thing. You have to trust your inner compass, right? That's what it's there for.
I'm just writing that down. That's such a, I want to quote that, can I?
Yes.
So you quit, and what did you do? It sounds like 2 weeks wasn't a whole lot of time to set anything specifically formal up, I would imagine.
Nope. I actually, my last day with the Hartford was December 4th. So this is like the 3rd or 4th year anniversary-ish.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant this year. Yeah. I'm like, what?
No. This past week was like, I think the 3rd or 4th year anniversary of when I left. And I didn't know what to do, right? Because I was like, oh, this is brand new. So I was hanging out with some friends who kind of did the same thing. And then one of my, somebody who does kind of the same work locally, her name is Sunny Dawn Johnston. She's an angel communicator. A bunch of my friends, colleagues had taken classes from her, and I had never been in a spot financially that I was able to do that, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So I took her, it was like an introductory mind, body, spirit practitioner course, and so that was one of the first formal certifications that I got, was mind, body, spirit practitioner. And so that kind of opened the door for me to do different things, different ceremonies. At that time, I became an ordained minister, so I can perform ceremonies. So I can perform weddings, celebrations of life, those sorts of things. And then I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? What's all this about? And then I started writing Shift Happens.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, because I had been, I'd been teaching workshops before, and I figured, my first thought was, well, why don't I clean up my notes and publish a series of blogs, and I can use those blogs to kind of, gain interest in what I'm doing. And then I started putting all the stuff I had together, and I, said, well, this is actually some really good stuff. Why don't I just put it into a book? And so I started doing some research, and part of me loves reading and part of me doesn't, right? I love getting lost in a book, but at the same time, sometimes I don't finish a book because it's too much. And I think that has a lot to do with our culture, the way it is right now. We're very fast paced. Our attention spans are very shortened. And so that gave me incentive to write my book in a different fashion. I wrote it as a journal, very short chapters, so that it's easy to digest. It's not something you're going to get tired of. It's not something you're going to put down and not get back to, because it goes so quickly. Yeah. So that was something that was really important to me when I was kind of in that process, was to figure out, okay, what's going to be the best medium for me to explain some things that I know that I frankly don't want to keep having to repeat myself on, right? That's kind of why people write books, so you can have your story told.
Well, and so did you know when you were in college that you wanted to be a writer, like that you wanted to publish books? Since it sounds like it's a similar degree that you had gotten that relates to writing.
Well, and it's interesting because I got a communication degree and my certificate is in writing. And certificate is just kind of like a fancy version of a minor, where you actually have to have everything approved by a committee. That's really the only difference. I did that because I was working for Wells Fargo at the time, and I could get a finance degree, a business degree, or a communication degree. And can you see me in finance or No.
Not really,
No.
no.
So communication was the best I could do. And writing was an add-on that I was passionate about. I've always liked to write. I've always loved to express myself in this written medium. I've always found great success in doing that. I've always, excelled as a writer in school, done very well with essays and that sort of thing. So I was like, maybe I should think about that. Honestly, I never really thought of a book. I mean, I had always wanted to, but I'd always joked around that all of my, growing up family drama would make a really great movie one day. And I guess I didn't think about the fact that I would probably have to write a book before it got turned into a movie.
There you go. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, it's funny when we say these things and we manifest them and we don't actually realize what we're manifesting, right?
Totally. I'm curious, when you were writing, was it sometimes, okay, so for me, when I write certain things, when I'm exploring certain things in my work side, it always seems to also relate to my personal side, to things going on in my life right now. I'm curious how that worked, or how
Yep.
did you use or incorporate your energetic gifts throughout that process?
I definitely can agree. Whenever I'm going through something personally, it reflects through my business as well, through whatever work that I'm doing. It's always that very thin golden thread, right, that ties everything together. I was very, writing the book was very cathartic for me because I was able to talk about a lot of things I haven't expressed before, talk about a lot of stories and kind of give a different light to them and almost release them from my being and my essence. So it was very freeing for me to write the book. There's a story that I tell about a microwave. I was probably eating something I shouldn't, and I used to sneak food because my parents were very, very controlling of what I ate. And the microwave broke. Like, it literally blew up and broke and stopped working. And so I got in trouble for it. And it was one of those things that, because it was a built-in and like super, super expensive, like, I never heard the end of. Like, they still tease me about it 15 years later, right? And so I know it's crazy, this microwave thing. And so, being able to tell this story and kind of give a different light to it and understand that it was probably because I short-circuited it because of my energy, because I was not in a good place. I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing, right? It was not a good situation. So giving light to stories that had once kind of trapped me, right? Because all families tell stories that we roll our eyes and we're like, do we really have to tell that story again? We tell it every holiday. Do you know what I mean? Every family has those stories, and it's like, okay, this was my way of reclaiming that story. So I don't feel shame around it anymore, right? Because now I understand it really wasn't me, it was my energy.
There you go. And it's not like you directed that energy to do that intentionally. It just happened.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. I totally get the stories being told over and over again. I'm visiting my parents in a week for their 50th anniversary, wedding anniversary, and my sisters will be there and some extended family, and it'll be interesting to see what stories surface because, of course, we're looking back to these 50 years that they've had together. I'm really curious to hear what surfaces as the memories, especially between me and my sisters. I'm 8 and 10 years older than them, so they remember things really differently than I do. And it should be, I'm going to hang out with my notebook, every time I hear a story.
Keep writing stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That can be my movie, but I don't really think they'd appreciate it very much. Just a hunch. Wow. So that's really cool. I mean, I just love that you were at work, something happened, you were asking for some type of sign so you know that it was time to end your job. You got it, you left, you found your writing. How have okay, so I have two questions. You can choose which one to answer first. One is, how have your gifts developed since then? Where have you gone with them? And the other is, how did you find the Lightworkers Lab?
Okay, so this is a really good tangent question because one is going to relate to the other.
Excellent.
So when I left, my job, I realized that not everybody would necessarily understand what I could do. So I figured I needed to get some training in order to kind of move forward, promote myself, if you will, because I'm still pretty young. I get that a lot where people are like, are you like old enough to be doing this kind of thing? I'm like, I get it. Thank you. Thank you. I have a baby face. But I decided I needed to start, right? Now I'm starting to appreciate it. But there was a point that I realized, maybe I should start, getting some more certifications, training myself, keeping myself educated, adding different techniques, tools. And so somebody who I was friends with at the time had found the Lightworkers Lab and had found Crystal and Trisha, and that they were teaching the teacher development program.
Oh.
And so this was last August that they were teaching it, August 2017. And so I literally came into the lab for the teacher development program because I had kept wanting more business training. I wanted something deeper. I wanted, because here's the thing, a lot of spiritual people are super like light and fluffy and don't really know how to run their business. Sorry, but that's just kind of the way it is.
I have to say, if we're hanging out in the ethers, it's really hard to come down to the physical realm and do things according to the rules of Earth. You know what I mean? I'm putting it in a really big context, but
totally,
I do think
in a very
but it's hard to, and there's a lot that goes into running a business. A lot of, there's the work part that we love, and then there's all the other things, especially in the internet, I'm going to say it because I'm old, or the internet age, it's like, not that I ran a business before then, but I remember what things were like then, and everything was paper-based, and that was tedious too. But now there's so much around social media and different platforms, and then general things like bookkeeping and, coming up with a plan. Those things can be challenging when all you really want to do is the work.
Exactly. So I kept seeing all these people who were just jumping in and doing the work and were kind of like falling flat on their face. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. So I kept searching and searching and searching, how can I keep refining myself? How can I keep honing myself? I had taken, classes, and I was a business specialist at a bank. I know how to run a business, but do you know what I mean? So it wasn't necessarily things that were helping me. So I kept looking for deeper and deeper ways to keep growing. And so here stumbled across the Lightworkers Lab for the teacher development program. And it was so in depth and so deep.
Yeah. I
was hooked.
Yeah.
You got me.
Yep.
And so from there, I knew, honestly, it was such a great value. I was just like, wait a second, this is so much content, so much good quality content at such a great value. I was sold. I was like, okay, well, we're in, here we are. And so, I've been in the Lightworkers Lab ever since. And it's been fantastic. I've been teaching in the Lightworkers Lab since last November.
Wow, you really got out there quickly. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah. It was very fast. My introduction to the lab was very quick. So I was teaching last November and been teaching almost every Thursday since.
Excellent. So what other influences do you have? You can talk about the classes you took that you think were beneficial, even if they weren't as deep and awesome as the lab stuff, or books, or other things that have influenced you along the way, things that you still maybe your go-to references, things like that.
So I will say that things have definitely changed for me throughout my process. There are books that I might have read before that resonated that maybe don't resonate now. And I think that's really important to be able to look back and say, okay, I read this book, it helped me at this point in time, but maybe it's not a message that I am currently resonating with. However, somebody that I have always resonated with since I've started following her, reading her books, watching her live, and meeting her is Anita Morjani. I don't know if you've heard of her. She is a beautiful woman, and she experienced she had a near-death experience where she transitioned, and so she has a very deep recall of her time on the other side. And so she actually came back, healed of stage 4 cancer after her NDE. And so she speaks from a place of pure love, and there's not really anybody that I can say that I truly resonate more with, because she's truly speaking of a place of just pure, unadulterated love. There's no trying to be a guru. There's no trying to be, come look at me, blah, blah, blah. It's just sharing.
So really
love
authentic.
and sharing. Yeah. Yeah. Authenticity goes a long way with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's important. And I mean, so I haven't heard of her, so I'm going to want to check her out. And it sounds like she has, I think she has a couple TED Talks. She has a YouTube channel. She has a few books. They're making a movie about her and her experience. So yeah, she's, I think, going to start popping up in a lot of big circles. Cool.
Over the next couple of years. But she's somebody who's always just really, truly resonated with me. I don't know if you know, I work a lot of spiritual events with a company called Celebrate Your Life, and they put on really, really big events. So I've had really amazing opportunities to hear and meet Denise Lynn, Colette Baron-Reed, John Holland, Neil Donald Walsh. I'm just trying to think who was there last time. Anita Morjani was one of the speakers. So really some kind of, a lot of people within our industry, right? And so
yeah,
I've seen a lot of people up close and personal, and it's not always the same as it is on paper, right?
Yeah. There's somebody, I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert. Right now I'm reading Big Magic, which Nicole Powers from a couple of weeks ago recommended. And I've had it since shortly after it was released, and just hadn't started reading it, but it just wasn't the right time. And now I'm doing it while I'm walking on my treadmill. So it's like I'm a captive audience, and it's really that I can focus on I'm 80% done. So, it's working for me. But one of the things she said early on in the book was that beware of meeting your heroes, because they rarely are the same in person as they are in your head. And yeah, I think that's a really good point.
I will tell you, I did have that experience with one of the authors that I worked with. It is not somebody that I've named, but I was very excited to meet this person because it's a very big name in our field, and my expectations were not met. It was, but it was a really great learning opportunity. So I don't look at it, poorly at all.
Sure.
I look at it and I can kind of chuckle about it now. So it's definitely, it's good. But yeah, and it's funny, Elizabeth Gilbert and Martha Beck, I worked an event with them in June of last year. So they're fantastic together. And so nice, so nice. Actually, I'll say they gave each member of the staff a little keychain that says Big Magic. And that's cool. Very, very infrequent for big names to really
consider the
honor,
people,
like staff who are working an event like that. So that was really, really cool. There's super genuine.
There's something I don't know if it's still on, but there's something going on next year in Phoenix that has Elizabeth Gilbert and Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild, who's from here, Minneapolis area.
The International Women's Summit. I'll be at that event as well.
Will you really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I will. Yeah, you should come out for that.
I might. I don't look at
it's the International Women's Summit. It's March, I think 7th through 10th. I'll be there. Mm-hmm.
Well, so for those of you watching, I'll add that to the show notes, the link to that, because it showed up. I don't usually consider many conferences or events like that, especially those that are outside of where I live, because, there's costs associated with it. But the Bliss Retreat is one that I've always wanted to make a point of doing. And this one showed up, and I'm like, I love the people who are in that. I really, and I don't know if I want to meet them because, I really have a deep respect for them at a distance, but I would love to hear them and experience that event. It just sounds really neat. So
you should come. I would love that.
Yeah, that'd be fun
for me. Yeah. Just saying.
Okay, well now because at the time when I saw it, I'd forgotten, we hadn't talked yet in prep, and so I'm like, I wasn't thinking, I had an aunt who lived in Phoenix, but now she doesn't live there anymore. I'm like, oh, who did I see in Phoenix? And totally forgot about you, forgot about Chris Hoffman. I mean, no offense, Chris, if you're watching still, but I was just like, I would just automatically went to family who I haven't even talked to in like 15 years, It's like, why didn't I go? Why wasn't the Lightworker group, my wonderful community that I love here, my go-to people of who I'm going to see? Because
I think we have a lot of Phoenix people here, actually. I think there's a lot of us in the Valley. We have Alyssa, who is Crystal's daughter, and we have Cara, who is, Cara, who is her wife. So, I say that excitedly because I get to see Crystal next weekend because she's coming in for Alyssa's birthday.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Right?
Wow, cool, very cool. I couldn't help but notice that you and Crystal had similar jobs. I mean, that was, I don't want to talk about her experience, but I just remember her saying she was
strange?
Yeah, that's just pretty, and especially I thought maybe that was how you met. And so it was completely through other circles that came together, and I love those types of situations. It's like, wow, that's really interesting, the similarities. So
it's so funny. Every time Crystal talks, I'm like, oh my God, how is this even closer to me? I don't get it.
It's just amazing. So other things that are going on, we have about 15 minutes left. And so things,
cool.
Is there something in particular that's top of mind that you want to talk about? Or are there other things you'd like to share with us as far as things, your go-to things? Do you use Oracle cards or do you use other tools? And one other question is there a kind of Reiki that you specialize in? Or is it just general Reiki?
So what's interesting is I say that I do Reiki. I'll tell people I'm a Reiki master. I'm actually getting ready. I'm going to start teaching Reiki next year in 2019 locally in Phoenix. But I'll be honest, when somebody comes for a session, I'm probably not doing Reiki on them unless they're specifically asking me for Reiki. Mm-hmm. I'm probably connecting in with their energy and adjusting whatever needs to be attuned.
Cool.
So Reiki for me was almost more of training wheels, if you will. Mm-hmm. Right? It gave me the knowledge, right? The base of knowledge, the study of something, so that it wasn't just, oh, you're seeing grids, oh, you're seeing energy. Mm-hmm. So it gave me the understanding of how energy works, how the different systems work in the body. It gave me a really good understanding of ki and the flow of energy throughout the meridians, right? So it was more, for me, Reiki is more foundational to unlock deeper potential. I think Reiki is fantastic, but I think we all have the ability to use other forms as well.
Yep.
I hope that answers your question.
Oh, totally.
Cohesively.
Yep. Yeah, it does.
I do love cards. That was your other question. I have a pretty good amount, probably about 20 decks if I were to count. I don't count because that makes me feel like I'm collecting things. No, but I have a nice little box that they all go in that's nicely packed up because things. But I love Kyle Gray. He is a Hay House UK author. If you have not heard of him, he is, I believe, he might be Scottish or British. I can't, but his accent is very yummy. He's super fun to follow on Instagram. He's very fun, but I really like his oracle decks. I have 3 of them actually. The energy is really light and airy and fun. I wasn't like super big into Doreen. It never really super strongly resonated with me. And then after Doreen, made her changed, transition to, her current belief system. So this is an interesting story. I went to go buy decks of cards to teach classes with to, teach people how to read oracle cards. So I'd gotten some requests for that. And so I was like, okay, I'll grab some decks. And I went to go buy the Doreen ones because that was what I had learned to read on. It was, one of the Ascended Master decks. And it the computer wouldn't let me buy it. I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're done with that energy. And so Kyle Gray has a much younger, more open and accepting and loving energy, if that makes sense. There's no judgment. There's no, it's just pure love. I find something that really irks me in the spiritual community is the judgment still.
Yeah. Yep. Well, yeah. And now I'm not familiar with Kyle Gray, so I'm going to want to check him out. And I can tell you whether he's British or Scottish once I hear him. I'm married to a British guy, so I know the accents well. And I like to study accents from those areas to decide if they're from Wales or Ireland or Scotland. It's just a fun thing to
I'm
play
pretty
with.
sure he's from Glasgow,
Glasgow.
but you'll have to...
Cool.
You'll have to give me that. He does a lot of live stuff.
Good.
And like I said, his voice is very yummy to listen
to. I'm going to still include Doreen Virtue's name in the show notes, just for those who aren't familiar with her. And I thought there were still cards available that her original things, but maybe they're not anymore.
What I've noticed, like on the Hay House website, they're always on sale. I think they're
trying to get rid of them.
Out. Yeah, because I know that they're not being made anymore. So like, if there's a deck you like, because again, I still have Doreen decks. That, I still have the mermaid deck that I use a lot. People, always like when we do messages from the mermaids, I still use the deck. So if there's decks you like, get them because they're not going to be made anymore.
Right. Yep. Good tip. I'll include that mermaid one. I don't think I have any from her either, and I keep looking at them but haven't gotten them. So that tip is also relevant for me.
And that's the thing too. There has to be energy. You have to have that connection. You know what I mean? There's been times that I've bought something and I'm like, oh, I don't think this is for me. And I've given it to somebody else, but then,
Well, in that I acquired a Rider Waite deck from somebody who it wasn't resonating with, and it works really well for me. But more so, I bought a Thoth deck. I'm not sure if it's Thoth or Toth, but it's Thoth. And I felt the energy of that before it arrived. And then I bought another one. Really, for me, it's Santa got it for me. But I know it already because, I can tell.
Psychic problems,
Exactly,
Yeah.
But it, and I did allow myself to forget the name of it, so I can't name it, but I'll include it in the notes. But I can feel it. I know where it is, right? Because I'm Santa's helper, so I can feel it. It's calling to me, and I'm like so excited to open it, and I'm not opening it yet, but boy, do I want to, because I can feel the energy, and I love when that happens, when I can feel it before. This one and the Thoth one are really powerful decks for me, and they don't resonate with everybody, but. The Thoth one has been spot on every single time. Truth bombs, really, sometimes. It's like, okay.
I definitely find that with cards. You can't hide behind them.
Yeah.
And so if there's like a conversation that really needs to be had, whip out those cards. Cards aren't going to lie. It kind of helps to have those awkward conversations sometimes and be like, look, don't shoot the messenger. It's in the cards. Yeah. The cards say so.
Do you have any tips for getting... so for me, I think there's a lot, I hang on words a lot. And so sometimes I trip up on the questions I want to ask because I want to ask it. It's almost like I hone in on the question. So I ask it like 5 times before I pull a card. And then it's like, okay, I'm just going with the last question I asked and that this is what that is. It's like I have to go through some kind of weird process. And I think the Thoth deck works well for me because it's almost like it gets that. Some other decks are like, I don't know what you're asking. So I'm just going to give you some random cards that hopefully you can make sense of. But I'm wondering if you have tips for that piece.
That's interesting. I will say I actually don't pull cards for myself.
Oh, okay.
I know that sounds a little strange, but I'm kind of always been of the school of thought, if you will, that, and again, this is probably how I was raised in my belief system. That I shouldn't go outside of myself for information for myself, right? If somebody's paying me, if somebody's asking me, sure, great, we'll pull cards, we'll do, hat tricks, whatever. But for myself, I don't go outside. I let the information come to me. Frankly, I kind of like being surprised, right? I don't like knowing everything. If information comes to me, if I see something that's going to happen, I know that it's purposeful. I know that there's a reason that I'm getting that information. But just for myself, I've never really pulled cards because, I've seen my friends get so like caught up, like pulling like 3 cards from every freaking deck that they have laid out across the entire table. I'm like, did you get the answer? They're like, no. Like, oh, well, what are you doing? And so I think cards are really good, but keep in mind they're a tool,
Yes.
right? For me, cards really help to facilitate the conversation. But again, if you're able to have the conversation without the tool, you don't necessarily need the tool. So I used to use cards a lot more, I think, before my psychic abilities got stronger.
That's really helpful to hear. And I think about it in terms of, for me, I know that I get in my own way a lot. And I do not always listen to incoming information when it comes to me directly. And sometimes the cards for me are the facilitator. They're like the translator maybe, because I know I'm getting, to me, and I love what you say though, because it's a really clear sign for me that when I'm closing off, when I go to the cards to ask specific questions, because it's like, what am I not hearing? I know it's coming to me anyway, but there's something, I'm blocking it or I'm not listening to it directly. And so it's helpful for me to do that. For a while, maybe it was even earlier this year, I was pulling a card today just to see what happened. And it was interesting how it seemed to, when I look at the end of the day at what I had pulled, it seemed to be relevant to that day without actually having it hang, as an informant. But I agree with you that, for me at least, my perspective is that we have all of these abilities ourselves without the need of a tool. And that I expand that to rituals as well. I think rituals really help us to anchor things, but that we don't really have to use them as long as our intention is clear and we know what we're asking for and, what we're doing, that we're clear on what we're doing and why.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 1,000%. It's really about the intention with which we do things. Because again, I think we get caught up in the ritual of, having to do something perfectly when it's really, if it's in our heart, it's going to happen. Yeah. And so something for me that this may not resonate for everybody, but in my experience, I've come to the understanding that if I'm at a point where I need to make a decision, I'm already not listening to my guidance.
Ooh.
So that's a really big one for me. So if I'm making a decision, I'm stuck in the human ego and I'm not listening to the information that's coming through because it might be something that human Ari doesn't want to do. Right? It may be, hard, annoying, stressful, expensive, what, right?
Yeah.
But I already know what I'm supposed to do. I just have that resistance.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm going to just meditate on that one because that's great. That's profound. And, with that, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to say thank you so much, Ari. I know. I told you it would go fast.
Oh my gosh. That went so fast. How did that happen?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like, I have like 2 clocks that I can pay attention to because otherwise I know I would go over the time every time. Love how time flies. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, and I hope you'll come on again sometime.
So much fun.
Future.
Yes.
And
I will fill out your form in the future, I promise.
Okay, well, I'll send you what I have. So when I pull together the show notes for the end of this year, I can make sure that what I've included for you is accurate and to your liking. But, it was pretty easy to pull that together. So
you were amazing. You just thin air. You got me covered, girlfriend. You're good.
It's an interesting power to have. It's like, okay, right? Yeah. It's easy to write about other people, I guess. But
totally. Much easier to write about others than about yourself.
For sure. So I wish you the best of luck with all of the things going on for you. And for those of you watching, if you didn't hear earlier, I'm skipping my next show. So I'm taking the holidays off. And I will be doing things during that time, including preparing a PDF of all of the show notes with active links. So you can just have this really cool thing of resources. And so I wish everybody a happy holidays, whatever holiday you happen to celebrate. Or if you don't celebrate holidays, have a happy December. And I'll see everybody else on January 3rd or 5th with my next 2 guests. Thanks again. And thanks, Arielle. See, I'm always wanting to call you
Thank you
Arielle.
for
Sorry about
having me. Oh, you're good.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Take care and bye, everybody.